This is William Rhys Porter reporting on lethal autonomous weapon systems. I would first like to define what a lethal autonomous weapon system is. According to the U.S. Department of Defense, a lethal autonomous weapon system is something that can select and engage targets without further intervention by a human operator. In the Chinese definition of a lethal autonomous weapon system, the 5 core characteristics that they list that make up what a lethal autonomous weapon system is that it must have a sufficient payload intended for lethal force. This is an extremely vague term that allows them to utilize many of their smaller drones to disable military infrastructure across battlefields that they already wield. The second such core characteristic is the absence of human control for the entire process of executing a task. This has been lauded as an extremely vague term as well, and substitutes the need for clarification on many of the issues surrounding these weapon systems. The third core characteristic of the Chinese definition is no method of termination once launched. They claim that if a weapon system can be terminated after it has been fired or deployed, then it is not an autonomous weapon system, and there are many loopholes that they can use to try to get around the definition the Western powers use for lethal autonomous weapon systems with this. The fourth core characteristic is executing the task of killing or maiming regardless of condition, scenarios, and targets. This will allow them to persecute anybody that they would deem a political adversary or terrorist or anything within their borders or under the control of these weapon systems. And fifth, the most conflicted of the core characteristics is the presence of an actively evolving AI. As these are highly disputed terms, the Chinese definition of a lethal autonomous weapon system is, of course, much more difficult to pin down, as according to the U.S. Department of Defense, which has an extensive list of requirements and characteristics of the human operators required to manage a non-autonomous weapon system. First, I would like to discuss some of the pros of these systems. Some of the pros that the lethal autonomous weapon systems have and are lauded are the fact that they save manpower on the front lines, thereby saving lives, the moral obligation of removing human soldiers from the front lines and saving the lives of those who defend our nation or their nations regardless, the reduction of post-traumatic stress disorder and other such mental conditions in soldiers after they've experienced combat, and of course, a non-clouded judgment at all times due to the fact that the robot itself will not have any moral or ethical dilemmas in its decision-making process as it goes to execute its tasks. The cons, however, vastly, in my opinion, outweigh the pros. It is morally wrong to subject an enemy nation to these essentially killer robots as they rampage across the battlefield with absolutely no ethics or any code of conduct, such as the law of armed conflict that most U.S. soldiers and otherwise follow. Many people see the use of lethal autonomous weapon systems as devaluing the weight of a human life, alongside even trivializing the weight of declaring war on an enemy nation. Many people comment on the unforeseen and unwanted collateral damage, as is already caused by U.S. airstrikes with drones and other nations' indirect artillery barrages on key locations in the Middle East and other nations in other battlefields. Many people foresee that lethal autonomous weapon systems will alter the purpose of war, making it simply a game for larger powers to provoke one another with in order to gain resources or otherwise handle disputes amongst nations. One of the larger problems that a con of lethal autonomous weapon system development is is that the development of these systems and the progression of technology as a whole far exceeds the speed and rate of discussion in the control and uh, limitations that people attempt to place on lethal autonomous weapon systems. Some of the larger concerns that many people have, of course, is that once lethal autonomous weapon systems are deployed in the greater world, any nation that does not have such a system will thereby be subjecting their people and their soldiers to unjust and unnecessary endangerment of lives. And many people foresee a massive global economy that may arise where only people in power who have these robots are able to control any part of the world discussion as a whole on the terms of any topic because they control what is essentially the soldiers of these nations that they would be making. And finally, there are many nations such as America, Japan, China, and the Netherlands as some of the core components of limitation and outright banning the development of fully autonomous weapons. America is very big on keeping people in the loop. They want a human operator to be present at almost all levels of decision-making process. Japan, while fielding no drones of their own, wishes very heavily for people to understand the benefits of having human intervention be available at all levels of conflict. China and the Netherlands, big proponents of defining what a fully autonomous weapon should be and whether or not they should be used. And the final question here is, should we join them? Or should we continue the development of such weapons?